Welcome to this explainer. Grab your detective hats, folks, because today we're cracking open the dusty, chilling files of America's most elusive serial killer, the Zodiac. And look, we aren't just retailing campfire stories here. We're acting as cold case investigators. We're going strictly by the book, looking at the evidence and objectively comparing the case against the two most prominent suspects in the history of this massive investigation.
Right out of the gate, listen to this direct quote from one of the Zodiac's decoded ciphers. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. Man is the most dangerous animal of all." Chilling, right? Referencing a classic 1932 movie, that quote instantly drops us into the terrifying reality of this case. We aren't just dealing with a killer. This was a mastermind who actively manipulated the media, ruthlessly taunted the police, and absolutely craved the spotlight.
Section 1. Terror in the Bay, a region paralyzed by a phantom.
Okay, let's dive into this timeline. Back in the late 1960s, this verified terror campaign was surprisingly brief, but it was incredibly brutal. It all kicks off in December 1968 on Lake Herman Road, where two high school students are tragically shot. Then, in July 1969, a strikingly similar attack happens at Blue Rock Springs. From there, things escalate. September 1969, a man wearing a terrifying black executioner's hood stabs a couple up at Lake Berryessa. Finally, in October 1969, the Zodiac breaks his rural pattern completely. He shoots cab driver Paul Stein in the affluent Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. The sheer randomness of it, that was the whole point. Anyone, anywhere could be next.
Section 2. Prime Suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, the heavyweight.
Out of the thousands of tips called in over the last 50 years, Arthur Lee Allen remains the only suspect ever formally and publicly named by law enforcement. So why him? Well, for starters, he was a former Navy serviceman living right in Vallejo, which was the literal epicenter of the early attacks. On top of that, he wore an actual Zodiac brand watch that featured the killer's exact crosshairs logo, and he perfectly matched the 10.5 shoe size found at the scenes. In 1991, survivor Michael Mageo actually identified him in a photo lineup. And get this, his excuse for having bloody knives in his car on the exact day of the Lake Berryessa attack? He told police he used them to kill a chicken. Yeah.
And you know, the circumstantial case against Allen has only grown over time. If you caught the 2024 documentary This is the Zodiac Speaking, you heard those staggering claims from the Seawater family. They claimed that when they were kids, Allen actually had them help construct scuba masks that looked eerily like the killer's executioner's hood. Even more terrifying, they vividly recall a 1963 trip where Allen came back to their car with bloody hands near a then unsolved murder scene. But the most damning part of all this, according to David Seawater, Allen had a tearful phone call with him in 1992 right before his death, where he simply confessed, "It was me."
Section 3. The new lead, Paul Dorr. Call him the Challenger.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the compelling modern theory brought forth by author Jarrett Kobik in 2022. Paul Dorr maps onto the Zodiac's intellectual profile almost perfectly. Like Allen, Dorr worked at a naval shipyard in Vallejo. But Dorr? He was a prolific fanzine writer completely obsessed with cryptography. He matched the 5'9" witness descriptions to a T, and he was an active member of the right-wing Minutemen group, who just so happened to use a Crosshairs gun sight logo. But the absolute kicker for me is this. Dorr published an ammonium nitrate bomb formula in a fanzine that contained the exact same formulaic error and the exact same phrasing, one gal, as a bomb diagram mailed by the Zodiac. I mean, what are the odds?
Section 4. Weighing circumstantial evidence. Let's look at the investigators' board.
Before we go further, we really need to understand this critical definition. Circumstantial evidence is indirect. It relies on making an inference to connect the dots to a conclusion, but it does not definitively prove the fact itself. Having a suspect who happens to wear the right brand of watch or who magically knows the right faulty bomb formula is an absolutely incredible lead for an investigator. But you have to remember, in a court of law, it's really just a massive red flag. It is not a smoking gun.
So let's look at these two men side by side. On the left, we've got Arthur Lee Allen. He brings the physical proximity, the survivor identification, and some extremely eerie behavioral quirks. On the right, Paul Dorr. He brings the precise intellectual profile, the high-level cryptography expertise, and that exact, uncanny knowledge of faulty bomb formulas. Both of these men fit the geographical and military profile of the killer in distinctly different yet equally terrifying ways.
Section 5. The forensic reality. Hitting the wall of science.
This is the moment where both of our circumstantial case files crash headfirst into objective, rigid science. Because unlike circumstantial clues, forensic evidence is completely physical. It's obtained through rigorous scientific methods. We're talking DNA profiling, latent fingerprints, microscopic ballistics analysis. This is the harsh, unforgiving evidentiary threshold required for a true criminal conviction. At the end of the day, you simply cannot argue with a fingerprint.
And this brilliantly illustrates the physical clues investigators actually hold in their evidence lockers today. Step 1. They have matching .22 caliber ballistics, linking the first two attacks. Step 2. They recovered size 10.5 Wing Walker military boot prints lifted straight from the mud at Lake Berryessa. Step 3. They lifted partial latent fingerprints, wiped in blood, directly from Paul Stein's cab. And Step 4. A partial male DNA profile extracted in 2002 from saliva found on the stamps of the Zodiac's letters.
And guys, we absolutely cannot forget this grisly artifact, the strongest anchor of the whole case. After the final confirmed murder, the killer tore a piece of Paul Stein's bloodstained shirt and literally mailed it to the San Francisco Chronicle. Why? Just to prove he was the one doing it. This physical piece of fabric definitively links the person writing those taunting letters to the actual scenes of the murders. The logic is simple. If you have the letter writer, you have the killer.
So the crucial point is what happens when we test our suspects. When investigators ran Arthur Lee Allen through the forensic gauntlet, the results were devastating for the case against him. His handwriting was a negative match, his fingerprints didn't match the bloody prints in the cab, and that 2002 DNA test from the stamp, it excluded him entirely. Now, Paul Dorr, on the other hand, is a relatively new theory. As of right now, his forensic metrics remain largely unconfirmed and untested by official law enforcement channels.
But hold on, because there's a massive investigative caveat when you're dealing with a mastermind. Did the Zodiac actually like his own stamps? Some researchers argue, quite convincingly, that a killer who was so meticulous about avoiding detection wouldn't just casually leave his saliva on an envelope for the police to find. What if he used a sponge? If he did, that means the DNA that excluded Arthur Lee Allen might literally just belong to a random 1969 post office worker and not the killer at all.
Section 6. An unsolvable case. The enduring enigma.
After 50 years of dead ends, false hopes, negative tests, you might be thinking this file is closed. But actually, the hunt is more active today than it's ever been. In 2020, an international team of amateur cryptographers finally cracked the infamous Z340 cipher. In 2023, a skull found way back in 1986 was definitively identified via modern DNA profiling as Donna Lass, who is a suspected Zodiac victim. And recently, in 2024, a knife turned over to the police showed male DNA mixtures that are currently under review. So it's like a giant puzzle slowly yielding to modern science. Which leaves us with this final, haunting question to ponder. Will the true identity of the Zodiac be found buried in old circumstantial clues, like Paul Dorr's fanzines or Arthur Lee Allen's watch? Or is it just waiting for a single microscopic drop of DNA to finally betray him? The files remain completely open, the real investigators are still actively searching, and the Phantom of the Bay Area may yet face the light of day. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep your eyes on the evidence, and I'll see you next time.